1 to 3 words best describe how you are currently feeling as of late? This is a question that I asked over on Instagram last week because I have a theory, and that theory was confirmed. And that is what we are going to talk about today. Hello and welcome to Shit I Wish Someone Told Me, a weekly series of educational conversations where my guest and I talk about all of these shit that we wish someone had told us at one point or another so that you don't have to find out the hard way. I'm your host, Johnna Renée, and I am going to be the only one joining us today for this conversation. So, like I said, I asked a question because I have a theory. We're going to talk about that theory. We're going to talk about how I arrived at that theory. And today I'm not going to be giving you any homework. I will be offering you some things that you can do if you too find yourself feeling within the 1 to 3 words that most of the people said that they are feeling too. But yeah, this is just a conversation to explain how we got here and to let you know that you're not alone. A lot of us are here right now. So the overwhelming majority of responses to this question, what 1 to 3 words best describe how you've been feeling lately? And by the majority of responses, I mean literally all but one, used a word, some word, there were different words, but used a word to describe that they were feeling at a loss. Common responses included fatigued, overwhelmed, uni, which is a feeling of listlessness, or dissatisfaction. And of course, within these responses, we also had feelings like hopeful, excited, amazing. So we also had positive emotions as well. But my point and my theory, which we'll talk more about, but my point here is that no matter what the responses, out of all of them, the majority of us are feeling tired, burnt out, unhappy. Again, some word to say that like there's a lack, right? And I asked everyone this because this is something that I have been observing with the general population, with my clients, with myself. And so I wanted to just check in and see if what I was experiencing, what if I was seeing was true, or if it was one of those things where I was like, well, this is just my confirmation bias, where we think the thing and then like suddenly we start seeing the things because of our reticular activating system is looking for more things to prove that we are right, because as humans, we love being right. So I wanted to see if it was just that and it was just me seeking out these things, or if that was actually the case. And obviously studies are, dependent upon the results of studies are dependent upon those in which we are studying. And at the same time, it's something where, like I said, even the good responses, the positive emotions were ones that also included feelings of, an indication or words that indicated that there's a lack. And so what I want to do for our conversation today and what I want to do for this week, as we have a holiday coming up, is not to give you more things to do. It is not to, give you more things that may make you feel as if you have to do them and like it's a burden, or to make you feel overwhelmed and like to add to the burnout. It's not to give you, something that like you should be doing to make yourself feel better, like for your self-care and mental health, so that if and when you don't do it, you then feel like a piece of shit for not doing that thing. This is not what we're doing. This is not what we're doing. What we are doing in this conversation and for this week is just having a conversation about how, in my opinion, we got here. And to let you know that I'm sitting in this shit too. Like I'm feeling it as well. And so are a lot of other people, and that you are not alone. And of course, I will offer some things that you can do if you feel it would serve you. Again, this is not a homework situation, but I will offer some coping techniques and some self-regulation practices that you can use if you feel they serve you preemptively or in the moment, whatever makes sense for you. And I also want to note before we dive in that we are, like I said, in this place where it's like we're feeling some kind of way. And I think that oftentimes a lot of us are like, it's not okay to feel this way. I need to, busy myself. I need to keep on keeping on, and I need to do all this stuff. And I'm here to let you know that sometimes it's necessary to slow down now so that you can speed up later. And now feels like a time for me personally to slow down. And it's something where, from what I've seen, it seems that most people have already slowed down without even realizing it. And so today, I want to offer that realization and some understanding so that you can relax into it instead of trying to resist it and keep pushing on. Because if now too is one of those moments where you feel that, like, hey, or if now is also those moments when you feel like, hey, it might be something where I'm best served to slow down, then may that be the choice that you make. And so as you listen today, I want you to think about how you are personally feeling. So take time to put a name to whatever it is that you're feeling so that you can then be more empowered to decide what your next best steps are. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into how I feel personally that we got here. But before we do that, one thing, trigger warning, all of the trigger warnings. Not sure what all we're going to touch on here. I mean, I have my notes, but I do just want to point out all the trigger warnings so that you can do what you need to do in the moment now. Maybe that's not listen, or in that moment when we get to that topic that might be something that you don't want to hear. So with that being said, first things first, why we are feeling as if we are at some point of lack is because 'tis the season for feeling the feels. Typically now we think of fall and winter as, pumpkin spice season and holiday parties galore. But historically and for most of civilization, fall and winter have been times of harvest and going inward. And so while it is something that we have advanced very rapidly as a society, our biological clocks, our actual evolution has not. Like the rhythm has been like, hey, it's fall and winter, and so that means it's time to harvest what we have done this year and go inward and spend time in stillness and slowing down. Nature as well, if you are somewhere where there are seasons, I mean, that's still doing that in that regard, right? Like the leaves are changing, like they're falling, and like it's getting cold. And so 'tis the season. I bring that up because I think that that's important to note, just because I do feel that so many of us are so far removed from where we were, how we got here based on an evolutionary standpoint. And so I want to point that out because I feel that that is worth noting and of value. So that's the first thing. The next thing, we only got 4 things here, so this will be a quickie today. So the next thing that I want to note is that as a whole, as a collective, if you want to refer to it as that, as a world, as a species, we have been going through it. Globally, it has been an intense couple of years, from the pandemic to the protests. Now we are seeing human rights violations. Experts are saying that it's likely that we are headed into a global recession. If you're in America, we are seeing mass shootings and hate crimes still on the regular. And I bring all this up not because I'm like, let's talk about the doom and gloom, but because that is the reality of our lived experience right now. And that is a lot of grief to deal with. And while, resiliency is one thing, people say like, well, some people are better equipped to navigate things than others. That is very true. It is still a lot, no matter what tools you have, no matter, who you are. It is still a lot of intense grief that we are all being exposed to on a global scale and also on a personal scale, because these things all impact us personally. We all have our experiences with them and how we feel about them and our sentiments about them, as well as something that we are experiencing as a greater community, as a whole, as a world, as a population, as a species. And so I want to point out 2 different concepts here when it comes to this intense grief. So the first is compassion fatigue. So this is a condition characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion, leading to a diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others. And that comes from directly from Wikipedia. So you can learn more about it there. You can Google it, you can research it yourself. But I want to bring that up, as well as the concept of psychic numbing, which states that we are, or suggests that we are more likely to help when things happen to a few people than to many people. I want to bring these concepts up because I know that in my experience, I have felt that people should feel more outraged, or that they should, give more shits, or that they should be responding in a way in which shows more concern and empathy than they actually are. And I want to bring these two concepts to your awareness and introduce them to you, not to give anyone a hall pass, not to say that it's okay that they're feeling this way, but to explain why some people might be responding in the way that they are, so that you could understand it better. Knowing this information, understanding compassion fatigue, and knowing about psychic numbing helped me to give people grace in wherever they are in that grieving process. And I want to offer this to you because I think that it's something where, we're already divided enough, personally, in my experience, from what I have seen and what I feel I've seen all my life. And so when we are then let down or disappointed or in opposition to how we feel others should respond to these tragedies, to these instances, and we then divide ourselves even more, I do not think that that is doing us a service. I think that is doing us a disservice, because we are at a time when, we've always been at a time when it makes sense for us to come together. And I think that understanding the concepts of compassion fatigue and psychic numbing support with understanding, like, that person just might not have the tools right now. That person, might not know how to deal with this grief. That person might have, seen a lot of things, and maybe, their social media or their news channels or their TV, like maybe they've just been bombarded. And so, like, right now might be a time when they just can't, like, they just are in a place where, something has happened in their brains to cause them to shut down. And now that, you have that information, hopefully it wouldn't be something where you too would just count them out, but maybe just give them time and space. Maybe just give them the opportunity to take that pause, take that breather, to not talk about more sadness for the time being. And I might get some mixed feelings about that, but I do think that it is important for us to have those moments where we don't just talk about being sad. I know personally, when I'm experiencing times of sadness, it's something where I will eventually get to a point where I'm like, fuck, I'm just tired of being sad. Like, I need to do something where I'm not just sitting in it and thinking about it, like, for a little while. Doesn't mean I'm not going to come back to it. Doesn't mean that, I'm not going to do things later. It's, again, one of those moments where I feel personally, for me, like I mentioned in the beginning, I need to step out and I need to lean out so that I can lean in that much harder and that much stronger afterwards. And so I want to offer those two things for you: compassion fatigue and psychic numbing, so that you can research them on your own, so that we can talk about them. If that serves you as well, you can slide into my DMs, you can schedule a call. But I want to offer those two things, again, just so that you have the awareness of it, so that you can start to understand, because this is some shit someone had told me. So the third thing that I want to mention, the third area, if you will, in terms of why we are feeling at a loss, is because of where we are politically. And I know that we have a two-party system, and from climate change to human rights to anything and everything in between, it's something where I've never lived in another time period, but I do know that we feel very divided, like I mentioned previously. And so instead of looking for similarities and finding common ground within our neighbors and looking for ways in which to effectively communicate with them, I feel it's something where we have been positioned to say, okay, well, I'm just going to cut you off. Sometimes that might be necessary. And often I think that what is also true is that at some point it's important to come back and reconnect and re-engage based on or depending on who the person in which you have the conflict with is. I think that we are at a place where there is so much overwhelm that we can't quite pinpoint where it is to put our anger to try to start to make a change. And so when we are looking at things from that perspective, I think that it's important to start at home, to start with those closest to you, to start with the people that you see every day. And, not to just go straight in and like, hey, you're against this, like I'm for that. And like, let's talk about it. But to first establish that connection, to start to feel some concern and connection with the other person before you then start to have those difficult conversations, because when you have a connection with someone, you and the other person are a lot more likely to sit in it and try to make it work and try to come to some agreement to try to understand the other person's point of view if you don't really know the person and you are just trying to change their mind. And so one of the things that I've seen talking recently, or I've seen recently is, and I don't even know if this is true actually, but it's an interesting concept. And so that's why I'm bringing it up. It's a meme, I do believe. And I mean, not that I think that we should all like believe the memes, but it's a meme that says that if there are red ants and black ants in a jar and someone comes and shakes the jars or the jar, that the ants will begin attacking each other because they think that the other team or the other party, if you will, was the one that caused the uproar, when in reality it's the person who shook the jar. And so I feel that that is another way of thinking of it, if you haven't seen that meme yet, when it comes to how we might want to approach our neighbors and those living closest to us, instead of, again, like looking at them as being the person that shook the jar, looking at how we can work together and work towards actually creating change for the person who is the one causing the uproar. So I want to offer that. The next thing that I want to offer, which is the last thing, is that while those three areas are things that we have all heard of, things that we all have our own personal experiences with, things that are showing up, on a grand scale and also personally in our own lives, that we also have the things that are happening in our personal lives as a result of those things, outside of things. I'm talking about things from finances to family. I'm talking about things from, health concerns. I'm talking about anything and everything that's happening with you personally, outside of or as a result of these other things that we've spoken about. Outside of all those things, there are also the things going on in your life, like your kids' grades at school, like where you're going to go for your next job, your relationships with others. And that is a lot. And so I'm bringing all this up, not because I'm like, let's have a doomsday session, or because I'm trying to, do anything other than let you know that you're not alone. There are a lot of people right now who are feeling a lot of different emotions, and a lot of those emotions, no matter how you define it, result back to, like I said, this feeling of hopelessness, this feeling of lack. And so I want to bring all that up because it's a lot. And I know that I said, like I mentioned in the beginning, I wasn't going to give you any homework, but the teacher in me can't not give you some tools to navigate these things if you find yourself needing something. And so I want to go into the first one, and that's going to be your breath. So I mean, we can all go ahead and take a deep breath if you want, wherever you are right now. Just take a deep breath in and then let it out nice and slow. One of the first things, or the first thing actually, to start to change in your physiology whenever you experience anything is your breath. This is something that happens when you start to get excited. This is something that happens when you start to become fearful, when you start to become anxious, anything like that. And so the first tool that I want to offer you is to start to do some type of breath work, even if that is breathing deeper. Most of us don't use about 30% of our actual lung capacity, I believe the statistic. And so it's something where breathing deeper, breathing more, can really have these benefits. And I mean, it sounds so simple, but oftentimes it's the simple things that you do day after day that are going to actually lead you to these grand results. Because as you do them day after day, they become who you are, not just these things that you do, right? So I highly recommend some type of breath work or meditation. If you don't already have a practice, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes, 10 minutes. It can literally be 1 minute. Start there, do 1 minute every day. That can be how you start to do this and make that part of who you are, if that is something that serves you. So there are tons of different videos online. There's tons of different courses. You can look up meditations, there's podcasts, there's just a lot of information. And I highly recommend looking into breath work if you were not familiar with how it works, when we could do an episode on it. But it's good stuff. And while this is not medical advice, I do suggest that you look up breath work and find what works for you. And if you need to consult with your doctor. The second tool that I want to offer is a good brain dump. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. You will hear me talk about this again. So that's taking all the things that are on your mind and getting them out onto paper. I like the paper example because you were able to literally look at it, right? Like you can see the stuff like written on paper. I also like to offer voice notes because you can hear it back. You can hear the emotion in your voice as you are speaking about whatever it is. And so you can play that back to you. You can do both, but definitely taking all of the things that are on your mind and putting them somewhere, acknowledging them, looking at them in the face and saying like, hey, this is important to me right now. This is something that's on my mind. And so you were able to get it somewhere that's not just inside of your head. So getting all that out is whatever form is true to you, or in whatever form is true to you, is definitely a helpful step. Kind of like how we did in this episode when I'm like, look, if you're feeling some kind of way, like here are all the reasons why you might be feeling that kind of a way, so that it's something where you can say, oh, right, things are less scary when we have the label for them, when we can identify them. Even if you don't necessarily know what to do with them right then and there, it's something where you at least are aware of the thing, right? It's uncertain, it's scary AF when you don't know, like, I'm just feeling this way, I don't know why, versus when you are feeling this way, oh, it could be any number of these things that you have brain dumped, right? So brain dump, whatever fashion feels right for you, voice note, paper, whatever. And then from there, the third thing that I suggest is moving. Movement is the quickest way to show your brain and body that you are in control. And so whether that be a walk, whether that be some yoga, whether that be a workout, I personally, well, maybe you don't know, but I like to just get a barbell and some weights and turn on some music. Rage Against the Machine and Linkin Parks. Oh my God, Linkin Park are my personal faves, but you do you. Some type of movement. You can also look into power positions. Amy Cuddy did research where she found that when you hold certain positions called power positions for 2 minutes, then you actually start to change the way in which you feel and your emotions to a more positive state. So you can look up that. You can try some of those. There are 3 movements in particular. The CEO, the superhero, I believe is what it's called. I call it the Beyonce, where you stand like with your feet, like a wide stance, and the hands on your hips. The CEO is when you have your hands behind your back, feet on a desk, kind of a thing, like a CEO. And then the Victor, which is just arms in the air, like in the shape of a V, like you just won a race or something. So you can look up those, hold them for 2 minutes, actually start to like embody, like what it would feel like to be a CEO or a superhero or a victor. And yeah, hold that position for 2 minutes. I believe it was once a day. It's been a while since I have actually looked up that research, but those are the positions 2 minutes is the time, at least once a day. You can do it before you go into a job interview. You can do it before you have a difficult conversation. You can do it when you're not feeling good right now, because while it is oftentimes, more challenging to mentally talk yourself into doing something, if you just do the thing, it's a lot easier to look back and be like, oh, well, I've already done it, right? It's a lot easier to just do the thing than it is to try to talk yourself into doing the thing. So power positions are good. Movement, like I said, workout, walk, yoga, whatever feels true for you. It's a third thing. The fourth thing that I want to offer, the fourth tool, is to connect. Connect with people you trust, connect with people you love, connect with strangers that are also experiencing what you are experiencing or that have a shared experience. And so you can find them in, Instagram, you can find them in Reddit groups, you can find them anywhere online. But definitely connect with people. I know that oftentimes we want to lean out when we're experiencing and feeling things and feeling low. And I'm here to say that that is often when you need to lean in the most. So that is number 4. The next thing that I would usually offer, the next step, if you will, is to take whatever it was that you put in that brain dump and start to make the big things smaller. So what I mean by that is, if you have like this really big concern, then, what's the smallest step that you could take in order to start to alleviate that concern? And while that is still the next step, it might be something where you need to repeat the other steps several times before you are at the place where you can, and where you feel motivated to, and when you feel ready to actually start taking action, right? Again, this is a time of a lot of grief. This is a time of going inward. This is a time when we are at a place where there's so much going on. It can be difficult for us to, pinpoint where exactly to put our aggression, where to put our efforts. And so it might be something where you need to move through the other steps. You need to take some time to breathe. You need to do more brain dumps. You need to do more journaling. You need to do more meditations. You need to do more movement. You need to spend more time with others and connection and community before you're actually ready to then start to take a step and an action. And that's not me telling you to not do anything. That's me inviting you to reframe your rest as being what's needed so that you can take more powerful action, powerful action, when you are rested. So that is what I have for you today. I hope that this was helpful. If you got anything out of it, please do share a screenshot of this episode on your stories and tag me over on Instagram at Hey Johnna Renée, and or share this episode with a friend that would also benefit from hearing it. This week's polls, as I do every Wednesday, I ask you poll questions based on the topic, and this week's poll question will simply be one question, and that is, what words of encouragement would you offer someone you cared about right now? That's it. So go ahead and start thinking about that. If you want, you can also slide your answer into my DMs over on Instagram, again at Hey Johnna Renée. That will be linked in the description. Or show up on Wednesday at Hey Johnna Renée over on Instagram and just answer in the polls. All responses are anonymous. I will, of course, know that it is you, but no one else will. And so, yeah, I will be sharing all of the responses so that hopefully we can start to give someone support that they didn't even know that they needed here this week and moving forward. So that's what I have for you. Questions, comments, or concerns, definitely comment them below or head over to Instagram at Hey Johnna Renée and share them there. The link for that, my Instagram and some other information, is all in the description, and I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, I hope you have a great week. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.